Hi, everybody. We're continuing with chapter 28 Dick's Cat Returns. The goat stared unblinking through the reading session. The lady had more or less told him the story of Dick Whittington up to where the cat was. Willie didn't care about reading, but an adventure story he'd stand around for. If you don't read, you don't get many adventure stories. The cat jumped back up to his storytelling place. Where we left off, Dick had just returned to London alone, but with the excellent goods he'd brought for Fitzwarren and his fortune. 5 years went by. Dick took over a greater share of the day-to-day counting-house business, scouring the docks, and seeing to shipments abroad, packing and unpacking, arranging for credit, settling bills. Fitzwarren spent more time in his garden. Dick was 16. He was tall and strong, with a curious scar across his right cheek. He made a fine figure on the docks, jumping into the lighters and wherries, and swinging aboard newly arrived vessels. He had purse money of his own. Although he was enrolled with the Mercer's Company as Fitzwarren's apprentice, he was more partner than apprentice. He was becoming a gentleman of name and fortune. One day, a messenger from Sir Lewis appeared at Fitzwarren's shop. He carried a letter summoning Dick to the old man's house at the change of bells that evening. Dick went. There were candles on a long wax table, a decanter of sherry, and a hard cake that was unlike any Dick had ever tasted. Again he glimpsed the girl he remembered seeing there before, taller now, more woman than girl. He wanted to meet her. Sir Lewis gave no opportunity. She did not reappear. "It is time you bought a share in Fitzwarren's business," the old man was saying in his high voice. "Here is a note with my name and seal. You may draw against me for what money you need. By a quarter or 3/4, but nothing less and nothing more. By no means ever go halves with any man, or you will lose both your friend and your money." Dick bought a quarter share in Fitzwarren's business. Fitzwarren wouldn't allow him the larger share he wanted because he said he was an old man, and when he died, the firm would be Dick's anyway. The sum he accepted, he explained, would make his last years easy and provide for the cook whose knees were bad and getting worse. Their trading house came to be known as Fitzwarren and Whittington. Their sign was a dark striped cat carrying a limp rat. Fitzwarren's motto was give value, and he did. If a customer ordered a pound, he got 17 ounces. If she ordered a yard, she got 3 1/3 foot. Any mistake he took to his own account. Dick kept those rules. Although their prices were not the lowest, the business throve. It was now 5 years since Dick had sold his cat to the king in Tripoli. She would be 7 if she was still alive. He thought about her living in the strange dark palace with the birds. Sometimes he dreamed she was in his room. More than once he awakened, sure she had just jumped on his bed. Then one afternoon, Dick spied the captain of the Unicorn. Hobbling behind him was the cat. One of her rear legs was bent and shriveled. Dick picked her up as if they hadn't been apart for a minute. His eyes moistened. At first he couldn't make his voice work. She began to purr. What happened?" he finally spluttered. The cat straightened herself in his arms. "The great rat took me on." "He attacked you?" "I attacked him. I'd tracked him for a long time. He was bigger than me. We met in his escape tunnel. It was dark and tight. He bit for my spine, the way rats do. I swerved. He got my leg instead and severed the tendon. I turned and tore open his neck. He bled to death. I lost some teeth." Dick had noticed that the cat's mouth was wrinkled, as if she were all the time smiling, a puckered smile. "I was dragging myself out of his tunnel when his sons got me. They skinned me. My coat was hanging in strips. I kept to my fight discipline, go for the back of the neck, scratch for the eyes. I didn't have bite enough to finish them off. My claws worked, though, so now in Tripoli, instead of 3 blind mice, they have 3 blind rats. When it was over, I was almost dead. A piece of luck saved me. I knew the great rat's escape tunnel must have a detour down into one of the palace wells. I found it. It was stinking water full of salts. The mud around it was even fouler than the water. I tried to drink. I gagged. In my agony, I rolled in the mud. It burned all the places where they'd ripped me. Then the hurt went numb. I got caked in mud. I lay there for days. When I was strong enough, I crawled up to the throne room. Himself didn't recognize me. When he did, he called for his doctors and a basin and cloth. He bathed me with his own hands in the cool, sweet water they save for their drinking. I lapped up what was dripping from the cloth. He ordered his own goblet for me to drink from, a thing carved out of rose agate with a handle of gold. It was for his lips only. His doctors couldn't do much, the cat continued. Himself agreed that since I was now useless as a ratter, I might as well go home. I left the palace in care of my children and grandchildren. Himself has plenty of my line to carry on. Anyway, I hear you're for Persia. Oh, said Dick. I heard it from the greencoat, said the cat. Sir Lewis, you've seen him? He met us at Land's End. The unicorn is his vessel. I see, said Dick. A chill went over him. He asked the cat, If I'm going to Persia, will you go too? She nodded and purred and stretched out a front paw with her toes spread, the way cats do when they're pleased. Chapter 29. A Hawk Attacks the Lady. It was a crisp, clear April afternoon. Suddenly, there was a shadow, and the lady screamed. A moment later, the crows swarmed, yelling murder. The lady had been bathing in her place in the road. No one was around. The red-tailed hawk hadn't been seen all spring, so no one was watching for him, not even Gregory, the local watch crow who had chased the lady and the cat from the crows' corn party the fall before. Bernie's barn, the pond, and the paddock were his territory. This afternoon, he was dozing. The hawk saw his opportunity and dove. The lady saw the hawk's shadow an instant before he struck. She made a tremendous leap. He missed her neck. His talons pulled out a clutch of tail feathers. As he rose for another strike, she rushed into the barn. Gregory picked up right away what had happened and started screaming. Crows have an ancient enmity for hawks. The hawk shifted course when the crow took after him. Crows are fearless. A hawk could kill one crow. But suddenly all the crows in the neighborhood were in pursuit. A gang of crows is like a gang of angry women in a street market after a pickpocket. 5 of them could do in anyone. The crows put the hawk on the run. With his larger wingspan, the hawk climbed faster than the crows could, wheeling higher and higher until he disappeared. Whittington had been off visiting the tabby and Heat down the road. The lady was cowering in the barn when he returned. The horses told him about the hawk, the crows, the lady's escape. Even though it was their favorite thing, the horses had saved some of the molasses grain for her and offered to watch for the hawk if the lady would come out. Whittington found her shivering in her nest. She wasn't cold. It's okay now, the cat said. We'll stand guard. I saw his shadow, she said. He almost got me. I felt the wind of his swoop. It was like when he took my brother when we were ducklings. She wanted to come out. She was lonely and hungry. The cat would guard her. She heaved into the paddock, more awkward than usual. Her balance was off. The best part of her bustle lay scattered around her bathing place. It would be months growing back. The horses and the goats stood by her while the cat watched the sky. The rats crept out to watch the lady. They were interested in what she'd leave behind. She ate what the horses had saved for her. Then she went to their bucket and drank in the odd way ducks drink, drinking in a mouthful, then tilting her head up and back to let the water run down her gullet. Everyone waited for her to say something. Oh, my friends, she began. Spooker, Aramis, the cat, the goat, the roosters, the bantams, the rats, everyone but Blackie settled back and waited. She stalled. The lady was like the boy on commencement day who was supposed to give the class address but couldn't get his wind up, who could only whisper, "Honored guests! Honored guests!" That was the awkwardness in the paddock. After her third "Oh, my friends," the old one yelled, "You including us?" Startled out of her stage fright, the lady bellowed, "Yes," and said her thank you. "Oh, my friends, I always wanted a family. You are my family. I rule with your loves. Just as I protect you, so you protect me. I am grateful." There was a round of cheers. Gregory the watch crow, who thought he had a hand in the saving, was disappointed at not being mentioned. Okay, chapter 30. Ben goes to reading recovery and meets Miss O'Brien. Ben's appointment to observe reading recovery was a week before Easter. Folks in town had hung out plastic eggs. He was to meet with a reading coach named Miss O'Brien. Principal Parker took him to the RR room, where a large-eyed boy with dark lashes was slugging it out with might, writing the letters in boxes Miss O'Brien had drawn on a cardboard strip. Some of the boxes had dotted lines, some solid. Said the boy, sounding it out. What do you know about light and night? Mrs. O'Brien was asking. What do you know about the silent letters in those words? With her help, the boy wrote the silent letters in the boxes with the dotted lines. The sounded out letters got solid lined boxes. Okay, said Miss O'Brien. Now let's sort out these B's and D's. Letters were jumbled on a magnetic board. Good, she murmured, as Keith fumbled to get the B's in their place and the D's in theirs. Now, W's and M's. Okay, now the A's and E's and P's and Q's. As Keith struggled, she guided his hand so lightly he wasn't aware of it. Now the sand tray. She made it a game. Draw me a B. Good. Quick now. B, M, W. 5, 3, 2. B, P, Q, W, M, M, W, D, D, B, P, Q. The boy's face got red as he struggled and wiped out, her hand guiding his. His letters were crude, but you could make them out. Miss O'Brien asked the boy to write a story. They sounded it out letter by letter as he wrote. I might make an egg for Mrs. Wright and Cheryl and Sandy. This took a while, with erasing and correcting. She copied his story on another thin strip of cardboard, cut the words apart, and jumbled them. Keith had to piece them back together to make his story. She jumbled it again. He sorted again and read his sentence aloud, squinting at the hard words. Nice job, Miss O'Brien exclaimed as he got up to leave. He smiled and wiped his face. Ben stared open-mouthed. Somebody else had his problem. Somebody knew how to fix it. I'm Miss O'Brien, said the teacher, turning to Ben and putting out her hand. The kids call me Coach O. Her hand was small and cool. She had a soft voice. Let's spend a minute reading together before you go back to your room. How about reading me this? Ben did his best. His reading was ragged. She helped him along, smiling, nodding, making notes. Okay, she said. You saw us writing in the sand tray. As I say them, draw me these letters. Good, she said after a few minutes. I think I know what's going on. I can help you. She looked at Ben as if she expected him to say something. He said, Thank you, and left. He knew which boy would make a face when he got back to his room. So we haven't really talked about this, but this is a really hard thing in this story, the fact that Ben has some kind of a learning disability and is having a hard time reading. And we all have things that we struggle with, whether it's reading or math or science or focusing or holding our anger. Everyone has things they struggle with. For me in school, it was math. Reading wasn't a problem, but I had a really hard time with math. For you, it might be something that even isn't one of those things. Maybe it's something else entirely. However, as a reminder, there are always people who want to help you out with whatever is wrong. In the story so far, it's Miss O'Brien. And even though there might be kids who make fun of Ben, which is horrible, even though that might happen, it's still better that he grows and that he can learn to read and then progress past this so that he doesn't have to maybe go to this class anymore. But you should never see something that helps you as a bad thing, even if it's not what other people get. It's not about what they need, it's about what you need. Okay, little mini speech over. We'll read one more chapter today. Chapter 31, The Cat's Operation. It was a clear spring afternoon. The school bus let Ben and Abby out at the farm road. It was dim inside the barn, brilliant out, but Abby decided they should keep to their routine and work in the old place. Once they dropped their books and run up the street to the corner and back to sharpen up, they ate the snack Bernie had left. Today, it was Gran's oatmeal cookies and chocolate milk. Nice. That's for me. Abby said they should run every afternoon because they didn't have time for sports after school. She had been pretty good at field hockey. Ben liked baseball. During the winter, none of their classmates asked where they went every afternoon. Now, there were questions. To work in the barn, they'd say. Friends wanted to come over. They couldn't. They worked on Ben's reading for half an hour. Abby watched the time. She didn't need to. After half an hour, Ben was in a sweat. Then it was Whittington's turn. Sometimes they had to wake him, but he never had to be reminded of where he'd left off. He was like a troubadour of old who could continue his story night after night without a hitch. Where we left off, he said. The cat had just returned. She'd been in a fight with the great rat in the palace and lost the use of her right rear leg. Dick had an idea how it might be fixed. He asked around for a surgeon who could tie up his cat's tendon. The muscle was withered and might not stretch back, but if the tendon could be restrung, maybe the cat wouldn't have to drag her paw. He found a barber who'd done a repair like that for a sailor who snapped the cord that runs from your heel to your calf. The sailor's foot flapped. He couldn't walk. The surgeon pulled the two ends together and tied them with silk thread. The sailor couldn't put weight on his foot for a long time. Then he had months of exercises to stretch it and put on more load until he could walk again in a rough way. Are you willing to try the operation? Dick asked the cat. It will hurt. I'll have to tie you down and bind your paws because when you feel the knife, you'll fight. The cat nodded. I'm willing. Anything is better than this. There was nothing to give her for pain. The sailor who'd been operated on had got dead drunk beforehand. The cat couldn't. Even a little alcohol would kill her. They shaved the cat and tied her down. With Dick holding his cat's head and the cat yelling so loud, people out in the street looked around. The surgeon cut open the old wound. Hours before, he'd come upon a stray who'd just been crushed by a brewer's cart and taken out its right rear tendon. With the best silk thread, he stitched a piece of that tendon to the ends of his patient's severed one. Then he did what he could to line up what remained of the torn muscles. Dick treated the cat like the sailor. For the first month, her leg was tied to a splint, and she hobbled like a tent with one pole too high. For months after that, her leg was stiff and useless. Every day, the cook applied hot compresses to the leg as Dick pulled and stretched it. Gradually, she was able to move it a little, then a little more. It was never right again, and her hair never grew back the same color, so that leg looked and worked like somebody else's leg tacked on, which in part it was. One curious thing. While his cat was tied down for the operation, Dick noticed that her rear paws were dark purple, almost black. The sacred cats of Egypt had dark purple paws. They were of a rare breed, gods possessed of special powers as protectors of women and guardians of joy. If a house or temple caught fire, the most important thing was saving the cat. When one of those cats died, it was wrapped like a mummy and buried with jewels and food for the afterlife. Carvings were made of them. You can see Egyptian cat figures in museums. Then Whittington stretched out one of his own rear paws so everyone could see. It was dark purple. We've got a picture of that, so there's that picture. You can see there he is showing everybody his rear paw. Pretty crazy. Actually, I will let us read just one more chapter. Chapter 32. Dick meets Will Price again. One day, the cat continued, a brisk gentleman appeared in the doorway of Fitzwarren and Whittington's counting house. Dick looked up. He had an odd feeling he knew the man by his shape and the way he moved. He couldn't be sure. The face was in shadow. His clerk announced a messenger from Sir Lewis. It was his old friend Will, the coachman who'd brought him back to London. It would have been hard to say who was more delighted at the reunion. Arm in arm, with each man talking as fast as he could, they made their way to the alehouse. Among the 100 amazing things that came out in their excited back and forth was that Will had worked for Sir Lewis since he was 10. As for the agent who'd been so avid for whipping the country boy at the back of his carriage years ago, he died in a fit one morning when his horse stumbled. "But I've got to be on to the docks," said Will. "Sir Lewis has a ship in on the tide. There'll be time enough for us to talk all the way from Persia, all the way from here to Persia, from what I'm hearing. You and the cat are to be at Sir Lewis's tomorrow evening at the change of bells." Will was about to leave when he remembered the package at his feet. "Sir Lewis sent you this book. You're to have it read before you see him tomorrow. He says it will ready your mind for his proposition. He begs you be careful with it because it's his favorite book. He's always reading it in it like scripture and copying out bits of the book. If I could read, I'd be into it before the Bible the way he goes on about it." It was a manuscript, a translation of Marco Polo's account of his travels from Venice to Persia and the court of Kublai Khan in China and on to India and all the places in between. 100 years before Dick Whittington was born, Marco Polo had set out from Venice with his father and uncle, merchants like Fitzwarren and Sir Lewis, who were searching for new goods and new markets. Marco was 17. Travel through the East and on to China was difficult. Few made the trip in Marco's time. Few made it in Whittington's. Dick read all night and most of the next day. He saw Marco Polo before him, excited and exhausted, one moment telling him how hard the journey was, the next how promising. Through Marco's eyes, Dick saw strange people, beautiful women dancing to eerie musics, monks in orange silks, dwarves, beggars, jugglers, beaters of copper, children weaving rugs, acrobats, jewel traders. He imagined the smell and hubbub of smoky, spice-smelling bazaars with red and yellow tents, magicians in tall hats, seers, snake charmers in costume, camels. He tasted orange and yellow melons. He smelled the stink of camel's breath. He went through desolate country where squinting warriors on shaggy ponies watched and spat, their speech unintelligible as Marco made the signs for thirst and weariness. As Dick shook himself free of its magic, he saw that underneath everything the book of travels was a businessman's account of customs, sights, and opportunities. Marco described commodities that might find a good market in Europe: silk, drugs, jewels. As for things to exchange, everyone around the world loves gold, coral, fine woolens, oil of rose, ivory, salt. "Why salt?" Ben wanted to know. "Salt is cheap," he said, pointing to the animals licking black. "The salt we get today is," the cat replied. "It comes from mines. In those days it was expensive because they got most of it by evaporating seawater in ponds and skimming off the crystals. The process took a long time. They didn't have refrigeration. They used salt to preserve every kind of meat and fish. They used it in cheese making and leather curing and to flavor food. No animal can live without salt. A small gift of it was a handsome present in those days." Said Ben, to whom the notion that there was a time when salt and sugar were hard to come by was as strange as anything. "Sir Lewis knew his man," the cat continued. "The goods Dick read about he imagined trading for as he heard the music in the bazaar and watched the women dancing. He pictured himself riding through mountain passes on squat ponies with the dark mustached men in the costumes Marco wrote about. He saw the orange-clad monks and heard their strange, outlandish bells. He wondered at the accounts of hashish and opium, and at how in India they practiced magical and diabolical arts, by means of which they are enabled to produce darkness. He read about elephant tusks, almonds, and pistachio nuts. About Persia he read, "The people are of the Matamaean religion." I said that wrong. Mahometan religion. They are in general a handsome race, especially the women, who in my opinion are the most beautiful in the world. He thought of his grandmother and her telling him the Christmas story when he read this. In Persia, Marco came to a city called Saba, from whence were the 3 magi who came to adore Christ in Bethlehem, and the 3 are buried in that city in a fair sepulchre, and they are all 3 entire with their beards and hair. Odd kind of end to chapter 32, but that is where we will stop today. Hope you enjoyed it, and catch you next time. Bye-bye. Happy reading.